The next technology race may not happen on a screen. It may happen inside the space between the brain and the machine. Because brain-computer interfaces are no longer just science fiction. They are becoming a real contest over medicine, computing, and the future of human capability. For decades, computers lived outside the body. You touched a keyboard. You moved a mouse. You tapped a screen. You spoke into a microphone. The machine stayed separate. It waited for input from the outside. Brain-computer interfaces challenge that entire model. Instead of typing, clicking, or speaking, the goal is to create a direct link between neural activity and digital systems. That changes everything. Because once computing moves closer to the brain, technology stops being only an external tool. It becomes something more intimate, more powerful, more controversial, and potentially more transformative. This is why the brain-computer race matters. A brain-computer interface, or BCI, is a system that detects neural signals and translates them into commands a machine can use. In the medical world, that can mean helping people restore communication or movement. In the long term, it could also mean something much larger. New forms of control, new forms of assistance, new forms of human-machine integration. That is why BCI is no longer just a research curiosity. It is becoming a strategic frontier. The reason is simple. If a machine can understand signals from the brain with enough accuracy, speed, and safety, then the entire relationship between humans and computers changes. The interface shrinks. The distance between thought and action becomes smaller. That possibility is powerful enough to attract researchers, startups, states, and major technology players. It is also difficult enough that progress will not be smooth. Because BCI is not one problem. It is a stack of problems: signal detection, noise reduction, hardware miniaturization, biocompatibility, safety, decoding, training, long-term reliability, clinical usefulness, regulatory trust. Every layer matters. And if one layer remains weak, the whole system becomes less useful. That is what makes this race so difficult. The promise is enormous, but the technical path is unforgiving. A brain signal is not a button click. It is noisy, complex, contextual, biological. Reading it well enough to create reliable machine control is one of the hardest challenges in modern engineering. That is why this field has advanced more slowly than public imagination often expects. But it is also why recent momentum matters so much. Reuters reported that China could see widespread use of brain-computer technology within 3 to 5 years, according to a leading scientist involved in the field, with the domestic market estimated to reach about $809 million by 2027. That tells us something important. This is no longer being framed only as frontier science. It is being framed as an emerging industry. The same Reuters reporting also showed that China is expanding clinical trials and trying to close the gap between research, industry, and practical use. That is exactly how strategic technology sectors evolve. They move from isolated labs to organized ecosystems. That shift matters. Because once a technology enters the ecosystem phase, the race changes. Now the questions are bigger. Who funds it? Who regulates it? Who scales it? Who commercializes it? Who integrates it into health systems, industry, or future consumer platforms? This is why brain-computer interfaces are becoming more than a medical story. They are becoming a system story. A story about how the next layer of computing might emerge. This connects directly to a larger pattern. The most important technology races now tend to move through stacks: chips, cloud, data centers, robotics, physical AI, and now neural interfaces. Each of these fields begins as a technical niche. Then, if the potential is large enough, it becomes strategic. That is happening here. China's broader policy blueprint has already elevated AI, quantum, humanoid robots, and brain-machine interfaces as priority technologies. That tells us BCI is being placed inside a larger national innovation map, not treated as an isolated curiosity. That matters because technologies accelerate differently when states start treating them as strategic. The field gains capital, institutional support, longer time horizon, and more pressure to commercialize. This does not guarantee success, but it does change the scale of the race. And the race is not only about building the best hardware, it is also about building trust. Brain-computer interfaces face a challenge many digital systems do not. They operate at the boundary between biology and machinery. That means safety is not optional, reliability is not optional, ethics are not optional. The closer a technology moves toward the body, the higher the standard becomes. This is one reason BCI may remain highly uneven in its development. Medical use cases may arrive first: communication restoration, motor assistance, Severe clinical conditions. These are the domains where even partial gains can be meaningful. Consumer fantasies may come later, if they come at all. That distinction is important. A lot of public conversation around BCI jumps immediately to science fiction. Thought-controlled everything. Mind-linked networks. Seamless digital telepathy. Those ideas attract attention, but they can distort the real story. The real story is more difficult and more interesting. Can brain-machine systems become safe and useful enough to restore lost capabilities? Can they move from lab demos into real treatment pathways? Can signal decoding improve enough to make interfaces practical? Can hardware become more stable, less invasive, and more scalable? Those are the questions that determine whether the industry matures. This is why the brain-computer race is not only about ambition. It is about translation. How do you move from scientific possibility to real systems? How do you build enough evidence, enough engineering maturity, and enough trust to make the technology usable outside the lab? That is the hard part. And that is also where competition becomes serious. Because the first meaningful wins in BCI may create enormous leverage. Medical leadership, platform leadership, patent leadership, data leadership, clinical trust, regulatory advantage. Those are not small rewards. If a company or country becomes credible in BCI, it gains influence over one of the most intimate future layers of computing. This is also why the topic belongs inside a broader documentary conversation about power. The future of computing may not belong only to bigger data centers or better chips. It may also belong to whoever defines the next interface. The keyboard was an interface. The touchscreen was an interface. The chatbot is an interface. BCI could become another one, a far more radical one. And if that happens, the implications spread beyond medicine. Work, accessibility, defense, human augmentation, digital identity, cognitive assistance. This is why the field attracts both hope and caution. The hope is obvious: restored movement, restored speech, reduced barriers between intent and action. The caution is just as obvious: privacy, control, biological risk, misuse, unequal access, pressure to enhance rather than heal. That tension will likely define the industry. Because the closer a machine gets to the brain, the less this looks like normal consumer technology. It begins to look like a civilizational threshold. That is why the brain-computer race deserves attention now. Not because the full future has arrived, but because the early structure of the race is becoming visible. States are signaling priority. Researchers are moving toward application. The market is gaining shape, and the public is beginning to see that brain interfaces are no longer confined to fiction. The long-term outcome remains uncertain. Many promises will fail. Some timelines will stretch. Some breakthroughs will disappoint. But the direction is real. Computing is moving closer to the body. And once that movement begins, the nature of technology changes. Because the next great interface may not sit on your desk. It may sit between your mind and the machine. That is the brain-computer race. And it may become one of the most important technology stories of the decade.